you need quick decision making and quick reflexes, and you really need to be ahead of what the car is doing, right? So you need to anticipate, is it going to oversteer, which means that you're going to lose traction in the rear of the car, or is it going to understeer, lose traction in the front, and adjust your inputs accordingly. So, and I think in the business world, if you can at least have a viewpoint on what's going to happen in the future and how do you shape what you're doing in your day-to-day business to approach what you anticipate to happen in the future and be prepared for it and be able to capitalize on it.
Welcome to Corporate Competitor, presented by Forbes Books, the podcast where executives share how the lessons they learned playing sports shaped their leadership. With me for today's episode is Lance Bergstein, CEO of Lincoln Equities Group, a real estate development and investment firm. He has worked on projects for UPS, Amazon, and Home Depot. Lance fits our model perfectly because growing up, he was a nationally ranked tennis player. But when he was 21, he got hooked on another high-energy sport, racing cars. For the last 15 years, Lance has continued to hone the craft and has raced in professional series across the U.S. and Europe. Enjoy this episode, and remember, we are now live on YouTube where you can watch all of the interviews you listen to every week. Head over to the Corporate Competitor Podcast YouTube channel and subscribe. Lance, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Don. Thank you for having me.
Well, loved your story, loved the what I learned about racing while studying you, but I want to start with what I think is a pretty amazing part of your story, and it's a full circle moment for us here on the podcast. A big part of your story is living with type 1 diabetes, and I loved learning that Dexcom named you a Dexcom warrior because of how you use their technology to compete at the highest level. As I mentioned, we actually had Dexcom CEO Kevin Sayer on the podcast, and he said something pretty powerful, which is that every Dexcom warrior, like you, becomes the name on an assembly line so that the employees there stay connected to their purpose. They're not building a product, they're building you. They're building toward you. And so having you here, it's a really, as I said, full circle moment for us. What did that mean to you, living it firsthand? That idea that you were able to find a way to navigate this challenge.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think being named a Dexcom warrior is a recognition, and it's great and flattering. But I think I've gone through my life having lived it firsthand and having been a type 1 diabetic for 30 plus years, where I've seen this evolution of technology. And so when I was first diagnosed, there wasn't much. And as a kid, it was potentially pretty limiting to what I could do. And so for me, my biggest mission was to instill hope in newly diagnosed children. So being named a warrior is great, but I think what's more powerful is kind of demonstrating that while you have this disease or this ailment that's impactful to your daily life, it's certainly not the worst thing, and it's an obstacle, right? But it's not an impossible deterrent. And so it's obviously great to get recognition, but I think more importantly, having the story shared by Dexcom publicly to inspire others is great. And Dexcom does a great job activating. And so they actually sponsored me for a race that I did in Austin, Texas, and they engaged the community in Austin. And I had a mom come with her daughter, who must have been 6 or 7, who was newly diagnosed within the last year. And her daughter was blown away that I was able to race cars. And so that moment of seeing a little girl who now, instead of having this impossibility or this negative outlook, now sees a possibility, I think to me is the most rewarding and kind of gratifying part of it.
I loved a line. I saw there was a video that kind of had some of your message in it, and you had the line, "Anything is possible. It just takes some extra preparation, a plan of attack, and the will and dedication to accomplish it." But that anything is possible idea wasn't true for you when you were young, and it didn't seem. And so the idea that both the technology has progressed, but you're heading straight into it has made a big difference as well, and your encouragement of others is there too.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the technology was so far and behind when I was younger. I mean, there were sports coaches that wouldn't take me on the team because of the liability.
Mm.
And so, uh, hard to grasp as a 6-year-old kid, right? That you're being uh, told no for something that's out of your control. And so technology has certainly enabled that to change, but there is 100% an extra step, and there's a lot of planning, and it's going to be a little bit more complex problem solving than just doing it like any other kid, but that's okay, right? And so if you have the mindset and the willingness to and the desire to do it bad enough, right, you'll figure out how to do it. And it's as simple of like if you're going to be a high level athlete, athletes are always focused on their diet, right? No question. But as a type 1 diabetic, it's being focused on your diet so that it's predictable. So you know the exact amount of insulin to give yourself so that while you're competing, whether it's, on a tennis court or a basketball court or in a race car, your blood sugar is predictable. And so there's planning in terms of the exact time when you're going to eat, when you're giving yourself a dose of insulin, the site that you're giving it to. It hits you quicker if you give it in your arm versus your stomach and how you kind of want to time it. And so there's this extra bit of thought that certainly goes into it.
I love the story of all that you've done, but I want to go back. Growing up, you're pretty darn good at tennis,
Yeah,
and
it was.
and so, but you gave it up at 21. Tell me about that, and tell me how you found racing, race car driving at the time.
Yeah, I grew up as a nationally ranked tennis player. It was definitely consuming as a junior. It's an interesting sport, twofold. It's not necessarily a team sport, even though you trade with others. You're on the court yourself. There's no coach. You're problem solving. And what's more interesting about it is that if you are playing little league or if you're playing, AAU basketball or whatever it may be at a high level for a junior sport, there's a referee on the court. And in junior
Right.
tennis, the line calling is the player themselves. And so the amount of cheating that happens at the junior level is incessant. And so you're dealing with two things, right? You're coaching yourself and you're managing your emotions for inherently when an inappropriate call is made against you. And it was a great sport and I loved it. And unfortunately, just shoulder problems kind of inhibited competing at a super high level anymore. I have gotten back to it now in my late 30s because it's just a bit more enjoyable than running, uh, and I missed it. But the transition to racing cars actually was a bucket list item. I had a natural ability. I think I'm one of the worst people to fly on an airplane because I can feel every sensation, every change in altitude, every bit of yaw on the plane. And so it's just impossible to sleep because I'm so in tune with the motion. And that helped me as a race car driver, just being able to actually feel the limit of the car, the characteristics, the balance changing. You're controlling something that's like inherently out of control, right? The cars don't have traction control, albeit some of them do today. They're high-powered vehicles that you're driving at or over a limit, and so you're controlling this machine that's kind of inherently out of control and pushing yourself in it. And then you're out there racing against other individuals, and again, you're making these decisions on your own. And so, can you outsmart them? Going into a corner where you can force a mistake out of them, are you able to place your car appropriately so that they can't pass you? And it's this individualized competition where at the end there's no arbitrary decision. You either beat them or you lost. And so there's that definitiveness that's just kind of addicting where you can hold yourself to a scale of success every race that you do. There's certainly no participation trophy.
You said something there that really kind of ties me into, and I know our listeners are largely business leaders, and one thing that's I think everybody is struggling with right now is that sense of being able to control that which you can't control. And it's we all talk about controlling what you can control, but you said something there about the you're controlling something that's inherently out of control. Um, how is that? how is that mindset or that ability to be able to do that? Um, how does that play into your business life today?
Yeah, I think I think, look, you need quick decision making and quick reflexes, and you really need to be ahead of what the car is doing, right? So you need to anticipate, um, is it going to oversteer, which means that you're going to lose traction in the rear of the car, or is it going to understeer, lose traction in the front, and adjust your inputs accordingly. So, and I think in the business world, if you can at least have a viewpoint on what's going to happen in the future, and you may be right, you may be wrong. I think if you've crafted, enough of kind of a database thesis, you can at least be more than 50% correct, right? How do you shape what you're doing in your day-to-day business to approach what you anticipate to happen in the future and be prepared for it and be able to capitalize on it? And so I think that transfers over where you have to be forward looking. Like there's a term in racing where your eyes always have to be up. And so it's not about looking directly in front of you, but it's looking as far up the track as your eyes will actually allow you to do. And so in the business world, it's doing that too. It's not saying, interest rates are here today or we're dealing with tariffs, which, is the buzzword, but what does the world look like in 15, 16 months, right? Inside of a year and a half. And can you position the business appropriately to survive and get to that point where there may be a point to capitalize, or can you capitalize during this point so that you can hibernate for a little bit if there's going to be a different point in the cycle? And so I think it's having a view and some sort of preparation for what you anticipate to come.
For the last 15 years, you've raced professionally, right? Both across the United States and Europe. So I want to get back to another racing question here because I read where you said that racing taught you to weigh risk in the blink of an eye and be decisive. Again, just to me, another powerful business lesson. The idea of seeing risk, understanding it, and having to quickly make decision. Can you share a specific moment, maybe on a track, where that decision making changed the outcome of a race?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are countless instances. I mean, some that come to mind is last year we were racing in Monza, Italy, and I'd actually never been to the track before, and so we qualified kind of at the back of the pack. And on the start, there was a massive wreck going into the first turn, and you could go left, you could go right, you could go straight, you could get on the brakes. And in that moment, going 100 plus mile an hour on the front straight of Monza, I made a quick decision to go into the grass on the left. And I think what went through my head is there's going to be carnage and wrecks in the center, but more importantly, most of the debris will probably be in the center too, which would cut down a tire, cut down aerodynamics. And so I made a decision. I stuck with it to go through the grass, kind of taper down the speed a little bit. And when I rejoined, we had no damage to the car, which actually saved the race because we ended up finishing P3 on the podium.
Wow. So I'd love to move that into your real estate development business. How do you cultivate that kind of clarity, that kind of confidence, especially in an industry where second guessing seems to be so common?
Being indecisive, I think, is one of my biggest pet peeves. To the point that even when my wife and I are discussing what we're going to have for dinner, or with my children, when they're deciding what toy to play with, just it's making a decision, and you will live with the decision, and you're going to learn if it was the right one or the wrong one, right? Which will shape decision making in the future. And so I think here at my company, when we're in a meeting and there's an idea or a problem at hand, I don't want someone to come to the table with multiple solutions. I want my employees to pick what they believe is the correct solution. And if three people are coming to the table, they may have three different opinions, and then we can discuss it. But at the very least, you have to have a decision that you've made on the approach to take. And so I think it will not always be the right decision, but that skill set to at least make a recommendation will teach you more, because you'll learn, hey, that was the right decision. And all of a sudden that's reinforced that muscle memory of next time you're faced with a similar situation, you can draw down on that. Or, wow, that was the wrong decision. And you will learn from making wrong decisions how to make right ones more appropriately. But most important is that this isn't, oh, we could do it this way, or we could also do it this way. I'm not sure. Like it's very important to me that people come to the table with certainty and at least one pathway to follow.
Is there a business example where your ability kind of allow that to flow into your employees has really kind of shortened the life cycle that other people would have been in meetings for weeks and weeks, and you guys are just like you're making a decision and plowing forward, and it's paying dividends for you?
Yeah, I think it's kind of tandem with like another business aspect where I think I'm a very deal oriented individual, and so I very rarely look to get the last penny or dime out of a deal. And so we were working on a large life science campus that we had bought vacant from Bristol Myers Squibb, and there was additional land out front, which we always thought there was some value. We never really ascribed any to it in the underwriting. But it was attached to all the infrastructure that was built out. And so we had a cancer therapeutic manufacturing company come to us, and there were some complications in having to put a condominium plan in place and structuring around how we were going to spin off this land to a different user. And I quickly made the decision that we were going to condo off our parcel. We were going to subdivide it so that they could go to the municipality and kind of pursue their own bit of land. But more so was the structure of the transaction. It started off with a lease, and it was going to be very complicated to lease the land. And I made a quick decision that the only way that we're going to do this is we're going to sell it. And I wasn't going to entertain kind of any other structure. And it ended up being a very successful deal for both sides. But it was, this is going to be a sale, that quick decision and pathway. And we started to pursue that structure. And B, we were negotiating on price, and we kept going back and forth. And it got to the point where I got on the phone with their decision maker and I said, hey, transparently, without games, this is the price that we're willing to do it at. And again, we ended up getting to an agreement, and a decision was made kind of quickly and linearly on a phone call. And so I think that's kind of, the one example that comes to my mind, but there are countless others.
Before we continue, I want to remind you that if one of your 2025 goals is writing a book, but you don't know where to start, I'm here to help. In my new role as publisher at Forbes Books, I'm working alongside a world-class team to guide aspiring authors like you through the process of getting published. Whether it's a story, a big idea, or a project close to your heart, now's the time to make it happen. Just visit ForbesBooks.com/Don to get started. This idea of, you empower your employees, when you come to the table, bring me an answer, right? Bring me a solution. How do you train them to do that? How do you get them, because inherently, right, nobody wants to come to the boss without the perfect answer. And you're saying, I don't know if the answer needs to be perfect as much as it needs to be articulated. You need to be able to kind of explain the vision that you had for it. How do you train people for that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's training. I think it's more creating the correct culture and environment that they feel comfortable approaching you with that. And I started off my career at a very large investment bank, which is kind of like the antithesis of
Right.
the culture that I've tried to create here today. And so I think empowering employees is extraordinarily important, to the point that you're not just telling them your opinion is valued, but to the point that it actually is. And plenty of the decisions that we make here were not my own, were ideas that came forth that I'm happy to give credit to my great employee base. Some of them were decisions that I made where I may have disagreed, but there's never this animosity or this negative reaction to an idea or a solution that's brought forth. It's more an open discussion where, okay, why do you think that's the right decision? And, oh, well, I agree with it because, or having real rationale and reasoning behind it. And so it's not about training them. I think, human beings are so mentally impacted from a confidence perspective that if you instill this comfortability in the environment that they're in, I think people are more willing to take that and risk might not be the right word, but that step forward to proposing, what they feel is the correct solution. So I just don't think it's training. I think it's more just culture and environment.
I love that line. Don't just tell them their opinion is valued, show them that it is.
Yeah.
And that's by the way you react, even if the opinion they offer you might not necessarily be the one you might have. That's pretty powerful. You know, one of the great phrases out there today, books are written about it, business, coaches talk about it. Work smarter, not harder, right? Work smarter, not harder. It's often quoted, rarely practiced, but you've built a culture at Lincoln that actually makes that mindset real. It's not just a slogan. How did you do that?
I think again, and like I go back to how I started my career at this big bank where bankers love to say work smart, not hard. You're working all these hours because you're not working efficiently. But at the same time, and again, without, naming names, there's also a culture that's instilled where if you ask questions, you look incapable.
Right.
And if you look incapable, now all of a sudden you're a weak link. And I think here there's an environment where it's okay to say you don't know something and go and ask a colleague or come and ask me or ask a third party who may not be, a direct Lincoln employee or could be a contractor. And I think, again, that culture where it's okay to ask, it's okay not to know everything, right? Like you're not working here because I think you're incapable. I don't expect you to be the encyclopedia. That's just unrealistic. And so working smarter is not spinning your wheels trying to teach yourself a concept or, how a specific, federal grant works for affordable housing, but go and ask an expert and be taught quicker. And now all of a sudden, instead of spinning your wheels for 3 hours, you learned it in 35 minutes, right? That's working smarter, not harder. And so again, it's just creating that environment where it's okay to ask. It's okay to not know everything. And unfortunately, I don't think across the business world that's always kind of created and fostered.
When someone comes into Lincoln and you're trying to let them know that this is the culture, this is what, how long does it take them for that? And is there something you do to help people kind of adapt to that? Because again, I love it. I'm fired up by the idea. I just know that sometimes people come in and they've been beaten down by so many other previous, and they've been told, oh, don't worry, this is an open environment. How do you get people to cross over and actually become full participants in what you're trying to build there?
Yeah, I think, look, there's obviously still a hierarchy in the organization. Like, anarchy, it doesn't work. And there needs to be some degree of pecking order or, a rooster in place. But I think the approach to that is important. And so the way that we kind of get people up to speed is you'll see me. I'm not sitting here in my office where everything has to be brought to me at my desk, right? I'm walking around the office. I'm going into others' offices. There's kind of no job here that's below me. I'll organize the conference room chairs if they're a mess. I'll, clean up the coffee machine, clean up the kitchen. So I think when you start to see that that I'm a human being and that I treat you no differently than the way that I act, and I expect you to act with everything that I'm doing, that fosters this environment again of, oh, wait, Lance is a human being. He's a real person. I can go talk to him. And it's one thing to say that, but I think your approach, your demeanor, and there's like this intangibleness to how you interact with people, right? Like I can sit with someone and tell they're friendly, they're real, they're genuine, they're fake in 3 minutes. And so being genuine and being open with people, and sometimes that means even sharing personal things that aren't business related and creating a relationship, I think again fosters that environment where a new employee coming in says, okay, look, I got to get my work done and I gotta excel and I certainly have to be dedicated. But at the same time, I feel that if there's a problem, I can communicate it. If I have a question, I can bring it forward. And there are, 5 or 6 other people on the team that I can go to, or Lance's door is open, with the exception of right now, because we're doing an interview, the door to my office is very rarely closed. And,
Right.
and it's, it's one thing to say, oh, it's an open door policy, but I think, you live the mantra. Like if you want to come and sit at, my table in my office just to have lunch and chat, be my guest. And I think it's, practicing that kind of fosters that environment again. It's not about telling them, oh, don't worry, feel comfortable to do anything you want, right? Because saying that is a little bit empty versus kind of truly acting in that manner.
Yeah. So I know I've read that you're a big fan of Henry Ford's quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. It's about what you believe, what you run through your head. A lot of leaders today are facing real challenges with turnover. It's been a real big issue for the last several years. People switching jobs more freely than ever. Um, what have you found to be the most effective tool you have in keeping your team engaged and reducing that churn? What are some things you do to that create the culture people want to stay and be part of?
Yeah, I mean the senior people here, the tenure is 20 years plus.
Mm,
Um, at the junior level, obviously, just because they're younger and they're newer, it's not at that level, but our retention has been pretty good because everyone here wins together, and in every deal that we do, the employees have an ownership stake in it, and so
what do
there's
you mean
there's
by that?
that in every deal that we do, the outcome of it, there's profit sharing with the
Uh-huh.
employees. They have a percentage of each deal, and so they're not watching um, all their work go to the principals of the company making all this money, and they're collecting their salary.
Right.
We are winning together, and so it's interesting when we monetize something or we have this outcome. There's this sense of joy because while there's pride in doing well and seeing it through, we're human beings, and people in the business world are monetarily driven. And so I think to the extent that people have this embedded ownership in the business that they're working for, there's a different level of dedication and a different level of feeling valued, right? You're no longer a cog in the wheel. To some extent, you're a partner. You may be a smaller partner, but
Right.
but you're a partner. And so creating and fostering that environment creates a different mentality from an employee perspective. And I think that's why we've been able to just retain people for this long.
So that ability to actually profit share with them on deals, right? Not on the year end or anything, but like on a deal. That's
Right.
really I think that's a pretty fascinating concept. But has that always been the case? When did you switch?
It's always been the case, I would say, for the last 20 years. The company's been around for 40 plus years.
Right.
And the way that it came about initially was as a real estate developer, there are cycles. Some years you're selling things and you're making money, and other years you're going, without making a dime. And so it makes you very good at budgeting. But in those cycles where these employees were not receiving bonuses, the way that we were able to keep them incentivized was to give them ownership stakes in deals. And I think the lesson was quickly learned that, okay, wait, we're not going to take this away now that, we're in a different environment and the business has grown. It was actually a very successful way of keeping employees engaged. And by the way, they're more inclined to scrutinize a deal that we're going to do, because rather than just saying, "Oh, the deal seems good enough," and the principals are putting the money in, and what happens, right? Their outcome is directly impacted by their input.
I'll have to think through that. That's pretty powerful. So you race at elite levels, right? You got to travel, got to go, got to be ready. Life's on the line, right? I mean, they're real risks in what you're doing there, and you run a major real estate firm. How do you balance the preparation you have to have? You mentioned one race that you were talking about where you showed up and you hadn't even been on the track before you had to race it, which is pretty crazy. How do you balance preparation and your understanding of risk in both those worlds? And are there decision-making muscles that you've developed that you think are similar between those two worlds?
Preparation for anything is really important. And so while I had never been to that track before, I had run hours on a simulator. I had reviewed video. I had reviewed data. And I
You
think
ran on a simulator of that track.
of that exact track. Yeah.
Wow, very
And
cool.
and so it's the same in the business world. I mean, there's a lot of data and precedent out there for something similar, perhaps. And so if we're entering a new market or a new asset class that we're bringing, I think it's extraordinarily important to be as well versed in that space as possible. And then when you get to the point of making decisions, whether it be on a track or in the business world, there's always historical precedent to pull off of. There are similar situations where you start to identify, oh, this deal is kind of like the last one that we did, and we had this clause in the contract, and we can tailor it here. Or even going to a new racetrack, I can go, oh, turn, you know, 7 at Monza is similar to this right-hand corner at Sebring in the United States, right?
Right.
And so you can start to draw a little bit of similarity. And when you start to position it like that mentally, right, it allows it to be a little bit more familiar. And the more familiar you make it to yourself, the easier it is to kind of make a decision to draw on historical precedent.
More familiar, you make it to yourself. I love that, right? That it's because too often we want to think, oh no, every one of these is an independently different, opportunity. Well, actually, there's similarity. I love the idea that we're going to find the similarities first, so that we can create some level of familiarity for ourselves.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions we've asked several guests recently. Explore a concept. I just have recently authored a book around on the science of momentum. Most of us who love sports can sense, see, feel momentum shifts, even within competitions. But I believe it's true in business too, right? There are windows of time when things are moving for you and against you, and you have to learn how to manage momentum in either direction. First off, I want to ask you, do you believe momentum is real?
100%. No,
100% in both sports and business.
yes.
Has there ever been a moment where making the right decision or a decision actually propelled you and the team forward?
Yeah. I mean, I think momentum is real. And to your point, it swings in both directions, in your favor and against you. And so it's capitalizing when it's swinging in your favor and kind of mitigating the impact that it has when it's swinging against you. But about 10 years ago, we had primarily been in the office, the multifamily and the residential sector of real estate. And we made this decision to get into the industrial space because we started to see that in New York City, groceries were being delivered to you versus going to the grocery store. We were getting more and more Amazon packages. And it started to feel like there was going to be this shift to e-commerce. There had already been some kind of early adopters or maybe mid-stage adopters. I wouldn't call it early, but there was going to be a big shift. And so we got into the industrial space of development, which we had never done before. And all of a sudden we did one project that was a little bit pioneering from a location standpoint in New Jersey, which ended up setting off a new market. We were the first one there. And now all of a sudden we started doing millions and millions and millions of square feet of real estate development. And when COVID hit, e-commerce exploded and we signed a big lease with UPS and then Amazon and Home Depot. And we felt this momentum shift of, wow, we're buying all these properties, we're getting them approved, we're developing them, and we're getting these blue chip companies to sign leases. And eventually the momentum ran out and the market turned. But there was a stint of time there where you could feel it and we weren't actually in the office. We were on Zoom calls during COVID, but you kind of felt the morale and everyone kind of felt the momentum of what the business was doing. And it grew our platform pretty significantly, right? Obviously, we're doing high profile deals. We're in the press more. We're growing our balance sheet, our capital partners. And it was a true kind of momentum phase for us. And then, the war in Ukraine broke out, which for me was kind of the shift in momentum in the business world here for a little bit, which started to deter some of it. And we were on this backwards phase where things were slowing down. And so up until the last, call it 12 to 18 months where things have started to shift again, it was playing defense and just mitigating, what that run was going to look like against us. But definitely real. Definitely have experienced it and waiting for the next strip of momentum to come. We're trying to set off an event that'll kick off the next run.
Well, you know what I love about the way you started that story was that you were noticing these changes, right? More people getting food deliveries, more packages, more Amazon packages showing up on doorsteps as you were, driving home. You're seeing something and then deciding that we're going to try to adjust ourselves a little bit to get ahead of that, of whatever might follow what we're seeing. So keeping your eyes out constantly, looking for that spark, whatever that would ultimately start to fire, was that's something we discovered while writing the book on the science of momentum, that the best leaders do. They're not just dealing in the present, as important as that is. They're also trying to predict what might be places they need to go to be ready for a moment.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it all goes back to like eyes up in racing. The further ahead that you can look, that's going to be where you end up. And I think that skill set of not just looking directly in front of you, and you brought up the story of the Target CEO talking about the snowstorm, and while you may not be able to see that far ahead of you, if you're on a road where you've driven before, you can visualize what's at the end of that snowstorm or what's coming up next. And so being able to almost look through that blizzard and visualize what's on the other side, even though it may not be apparent, I think is important also.
Well, awesome. Well, I hope one day you and I will be able to continue talking about momentum as that next thing happens for you. And it's been exciting to be in this journey to study this concept for a long time and to talk to great business leaders about how they've capitalized on those opportunities. Lance, it feels like I could talk all day. With you, I've learned so much already. Literally, I got pages of notes here. I'm riveted by some of the different nuggets here, but it all goes back to your eyes up while racing, and my eyes are up and better today because you were a corporate competitor with us. Thank you, thank you,
Thank you.
So much interesting content there, because these are conversations I've never had before. I've never talked to anyone in his space, both either in business or in racing, quite the way that he was able to share it. Lance really filled me with ideas today, but the first one was about the importance of muscle memory, how you apply something that you've experienced previously to help you prepare for something you're up against now, right? That you don't have to, that sometimes we get caught up as leaders thinking, oh, this is all new space. This is something that we've never dealt with before. And you lose the ability to kind of keep yourself together because you feel overwhelmed. And he says, even if it's not exactly the same, I love this example, right? As you're looking at a racetrack as a driver, you might notice that turn 7 at Monza might remind you of turn 8 at Road America, whatever it is. But the idea that I've navigated that before, so I'll be good in turn 7. I think I have a strong sense of what I need to do. It helps keep you from becoming overwhelmed when you think you're not up against a new problem. You have the tools to help you solve the problem at hand. So for all you listening, maybe it's a client question you've had before. Maybe you're drawing from an experience you had playing sports. Lean into the memories, the muscle memory you have, to help allow you to more calmly navigate the situation at hand. The second was really powerful about this idea about controlling something that is inherently out of control. That's the way he described race car driving, right? You're trying to control something that is inherently out of control. How do you do that? You do it, he said, by keeping your eyes up, right? Eyes up. And by that doesn't mean you're looking at what's right in front of you. You're actually looking out as far as possible. He does it on the racetrack, but he said he does it in his business too. What's in front of us, but how far out can I look? And that really led into the third point that really stood out to me about momentum. Obviously, a passion play for me right now with the new book out on the science of momentum, but that idea that you look for the spark, you're always out there looking ahead. What do you see in your world that might be something that's just beginning, that you see potential for? Find that one step that you can take ahead of others, and that could be the start of your momentum. It can be the spark of your fire, opportunities that might not naturally be yours, which allow you to get ahead of the moment. And then when the moment comes, it's you that has the momentum. I loved the conversation today, and If you like this interview, please leave us a comment and we'll give you a shout out in a future episode. It is so much fun to have these conversations and to share them with you. I appreciate you. Bergstein would have been a great president. Lincoln, he was just so so.